The first time the name human was whispered in the Galactic Senate, most laughed. They were seen as just another backwater species on a dying blue planet, too emotional, too fragmented, too primitive. They hadn't even colonized beyond their star system when the Senate marked them as non-hostile and irrelevant. That was their first mistake. I remember the day they decided to take Earth. I was there. I sat behind the Varkos delegation as their lead envoy clicked and hissed through his translator. "We will extract the minerals with precision. The species will be managed. Resistance will be brief." Brief. That word still haunts me. They landed their drones in what used to be called Africa, near a region rich in cobalt and uranium. At first, humans protested. Peaceful, mostly. Some fought with guns, some tried with words. The aliens barely noticed. They rolled over entire cities with mechs taller than towers, neutralizing entire resistance cells in seconds. But humans don't forget. And they never take loss quietly. The retaliation didn't start with governments or armies. It started with one man, a father. His name was Commander Grant, though most in the galaxy know him by his other name now, the Earthfire. He lost his 2 sons in the mineral raids, crushed beneath rubble when the drones fired on a civilian convoy. His wife died later from injuries. They said it was a statistical inevitability. That word, that cold, calculated excuse, lit a fire inside him no alien algorithm could ever predict. Grant didn't scream. He didn't beg. He vanished. For 2 years, nothing. Then came the first explosion. Not on Earth, but on Varan 5, a mining world 3 galaxies over, the entire capital city vaporized. 11,000 Varkos officials gone in under 12 seconds. No trace, no signal, just a message burned into the orbital satellite feed. You touched Earth. Now Earth touches back. That's when the fear began. The Galactic Senate tried to downplay it. They called it a terrorist act. They said it was an isolated human faction. But in the following 6 months, 6 more attacks followed, each precise, each merciless. Entire planets erased like smudges off a screen. No survivors. Always the same message left behind. I remember one senator from the Kothari species, arrogant, long-necked diplomat with 9 tentacles. He stood during session, laughed, and said, "Let them come. We've wiped out more dangerous insects in our history." 2 days later, his palace was reduced to ash. His species went underground. Literally. They haven't surfaced since. Here's the thing we didn't understand back then. Humans are emotional, but they weaponize emotion. You burn their homes, they don't rebuild. They come back with fire. Not because they enjoy war, but because they refuse to forget pain. Some of the older species, the ones who survived the first purge centuries ago, started whispering warnings across sectors. Do not provoke the humans. Their retaliation is legendary. Most didn't listen. They thought it was myth, an exaggeration of war stories. But I've seen it. I've seen the aftermath of Earth's revenge. I've walked through the glassed ruins of Trask 4. I've stood at the edges of scorched oceans, where once thriving cities were reduced to blackened craters. And I've read the reports, classified, hidden deep in Senate records, about what humans do when they truly go to war. You don't win, you don't survive, you disappear. Now I sit here, in the cold silence of a space station orbiting the wreck of what used to be the Varkos homeworld. I record this warning not for my kind. We are already dying. But for those who will come after. For any species foolish enough to test Earth again. Do not mistake their patience for weakness. Do not mistake their silence for surrender. And above all, never hurt what they love. Because if you do, they'll come for you. And when they come, they don't stop. They say revenge has no timeline. For humans, that couldn't be more true. After the 6th world fell, the Galactic Senate finally acknowledged the truth. This was no rogue faction, no terrorist cell. It was coordinated, precise, deliberate. And it wasn't just one man anymore. Grant, Commander Earthfire, had become a ghostly myth to most, a name only whispered among soldiers and mercenaries. But behind the scenes, he was building something. Not just a response force, not a resistance group, but a machine of vengeance. A movement with a singular goal. Never again would Earth be touched without punishment. What scared the Senate the most wasn't the destruction. It was the silence. There were no broadcasts, no ultimatums, no declarations of war. Just the burning of worlds, one after another, with only a small, chilling signature left in the wreckage. Retribution delivered. It wasn't until they targeted Harkon Station, the Senate's most fortified command center, that we truly understood what the humans had become. Harkon was impenetrable. A fortress floating on the edge of a gravity well, protected by 12 planetary-grade railguns and a standing fleet of 40,000 elite troops. It was a symbol, a statement. This is where the galaxy draws its line. And it vanished in under 30 minutes. I was stationed on Tarnus 7 when the news came. No warning, just static feeds. Silence from the station. Then, fragments, shattered hulls, debris fields stretching thousands of kilometers. Not a single life form recovered. The last image retrieved from a damaged escape pod showed a man. Tall, pale, cold eyes staring into the camera. No helmet, no insignia, just a patch on his arm. It wasn't a flag, not a nation's crest, just one word. Earth. It was then the fear reached its peak. Species who had mocked Earth began suing for peace. Entire systems abandoned their colonies just to avoid being associated with the aggressors. Trade routes were cut. Military alliances collapsed. Smugglers started refusing Earthbound missions. Even the Senate itself, once proud and all-powerful, declared emergency neutrality toward the human conflict. But it was too late. See, humans don't negotiate after the fact. They remember, they wait. And when they rise, it's not for control. It's for balance. Not one that includes forgiveness, but one that ensures pain is paid back with interest. Grant wasn't alone anymore. He'd built an underground alliance, not of planets, but of people. Men and women who had watched loved ones be dragged from shelters, their cities flattened for minerals, their children buried under alien rubble. He didn't recruit, he didn't persuade, he just waited. Because loss creates warriors. His fleet wasn't official, it didn't fly under any nation's banner, but it was deadlier than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Each vessel retrofitted from stolen tech, enhanced with human ingenuity, brutality, and unpredictability. Where alien ships relied on shields and protocol, human ships used tactical rage. Fast, precise, overwhelming strikes meant not to win wars, but to end enemies. And the worst part? They learned. Every battle, every attack, humans recorded, adapted, evolved. Aliens fought with doctrine. Humans fought like predators. They weren't the biggest, they weren't the strongest, but they understood something few species ever did. War isn't fair. It's about who wants it more. And humans always wanted more. There was one moment that changed everything for me personally. I was stationed aboard the Drekthol Interceptor, a Senate cruiser patrolling the Remora sector. We were there to monitor human movements, which really meant try not to piss them off. Our command thought if we kept our distance, we'd be spared. We intercepted a transmission, faint, garbled, but it wasn't military. It was a child, human, crying. Something about a refugee ship being hit by pirates, non-human raiders, feeding on Earth's fractured refugee trail. Protocols stated we ignore unauthorized transmissions, but I couldn't. I don't know why. Maybe because even across species, the sound of a child crying for help feels the same. I convinced the captain to let us investigate. When we found the wreck, it was exactly what the child said. Raided, stripped, bodies everywhere. But one boy survived. 8 years old. Quiet. His eyes hollow. He didn't cry. He just stared at us like he didn't trust us to be real. We took him aboard. The captain kept him hidden, afraid our command would see it as collaborating with a hostile species. That's how deep the fear had spread. A week later, our ship was boarded. No warning, no scan, just a blinding light, a pulse that disabled our weapons. Human soldiers, armor black as void, helmets with red visors, walked in like ghosts, not killing, not yelling, just moving with perfect coordination. In less than 10 minutes, we were neutralized. Then one of them spoke. Calm, controlled, male voice, American accent, cold as frost. We came for the boy. The captain tried to protest, said we'd saved him, protected him, that we weren't enemies. The soldier didn't argue, he didn't shout. He just turned and said, "Commander Earthfire sends his thanks." But this is not a rescue, this is a reminder. And then they left. No destruction, no bloodshed, just a message, a test. And we'd passed. That was the moment I realized the humans had rewritten the rules of war. They weren't fighting for conquest. They weren't looking for territory. They weren't seeking galactic recognition. They were making a point. You hurt them, even once, and they'll make you remember for centuries. Now, in the shadows of broken worlds, the name human carries a weight heavier than any throne. There are sectors where their ships never go, because they don't need to. The stories do the work for them. Children of other species grow up hearing tales of Commander Earthfire, not as a villain, not even as a hero, but as a warning. Proof that you don't survive by mocking weakness, because sometimes that weakness turns out to be human. And humans, they're the only species that thrives in pain. Some try to explain it, say their brains are different, that their emotions are volatile chemicals with no regulation, that they bond too deeply, grieve too hard, love too fiercely. But that's not it. The truth is, humans carry something deeper than biology, something no scanner can detect, no algorithm can predict, a grudge. They don't forget, they don't forgive, and when they fight, they bring everything, their sorrow, their rage, their history. That's why the old generals of the Galactic War whisper their name like a curse. That's why veteran species avoid eye contact when speaking of Earth. And that's why I recorded this testimony. Because this galaxy forgets too easily. It forgets the smell of burning worlds, the screams through broken comms, the way Earth's warships appear from black space, no warning, no negotiation, just justice. And somewhere, out there, Commander Earthfire is still watching, still waiting. Not for war, for a reason. A reason to show us all again why the phrase, "do not provoke the humans," is not advice. It's a survival command. Because in this universe, you can step on any creature and feel nothing. But when you step on a human, you better pray they don't stand back up. I still remember the look in the boy's eyes, the one we rescued from the pirate wreck. He barely spoke a word the entire time he was aboard the Drechthul Interceptor. But those eyes, like something inside him had already died, like he'd seen the worst the universe had to offer and realized it could only get worse. But when the human strike team took him, he didn't cry. He didn't ask questions. He didn't even flinch. He just nodded, like he'd been waiting for them. After they left, we all stood there, officers, security teams, crew, completely stunned. Not a shot fired, not a scream heard, just efficiency, precision, and presence. That's what made it terrifying. They weren't loud about their power. They didn't need to be. Humans moved like they knew exactly who they were. They had nothing left to lose. Our ship was left untouched, but the message was clear. If you had something they wanted, they could take it. Not out of cruelty, not even for vengeance, just because they could. 2 weeks after that incident, whispers began to circulate about a new human presence near the Outer Rim colonies. Not warships, but something else. Something called the Ember Line. We didn't know what it was at first. No official records, no confirmed sightings, just fragments, half-dead transmission logs, stories from smugglers and freight runners. They all said the same thing. A line of fire in space, ships appearing and disappearing in moments, silent, ghost-like, always near planets that had betrayed Earth. One freighter captain claimed he passed through the area on a routine mineral run and saw a chain of vessels lined like teeth in a jaw, all black, no IDs, no movement. But when I blinked, they were gone. He didn't even dock, just turned his ship and fled. That man was a veteran of 5 Senate wars. He never shook during combat. But when he told his story, his hands trembled like he was freezing. The Ember Line was more than just a military presence. It was a signal, a perimeter, a warning. The message was simple. We see everything. Step closer, and we'll erase you. Within 2 months, 7 former Earth-exploiting colonies went dark, one by one. No distress signals, no survivors. The last known communication from any of them came from a panicked scientist screaming into his comlink before static cut him off. They're not coming with armies. They're coming like a storm. You don't see it until it's already on top of you. That transmission was never made public, but I heard it. I worked in intelligence analysis back then. Sat in a dark room reading the fallout reports while officials panicked about how to contain the growing human threat. But here's the thing no one at the top wanted to admit. It was too late to contain anything. Humans had shifted. The pain of what had been done to them, their families, their homes, their world, had forged something unstoppable. Something beyond war. Beyond strategy. They weren't fighting for survival anymore. They were erasing history, rewriting the power structures of the galaxy with fire and steel. And the galaxy was powerless to stop them. Because humans don't build legacies on peace treaties. They build them on the bones of those who underestimated them. What's worse, they didn't want control. They didn't want territory. That's what made them dangerous. They didn't play the game. They were burning the board. I was transferred to a diplomatic post shortly after the Ember Line emerged. They assigned me to Ratus Prime, a neutral world far from contested zones. My role was to monitor communications and assess the psychological impact of human escalation across local systems. It didn't take long to see the patterns. The shift wasn't just military, it was cultural. Entire civilizations were now changing how they taught history. Academic institutions that once labeled Earth as a primitive cradle world were rewriting their texts. Diplomats began avoiding human topics altogether. Fear had become currency, and Earth owned the bank. I'll never forget one conversation I had with a Ulori trader. Big, scaly bastard with eyes like oil. He leaned across the table in a smoky bar and said, "You ever wonder why the humans don't broadcast their victories? Why they don't post propaganda?" I shrugged. "They don't need to?" He grinned, teeth like shattered glass. "Exactly, because they let the silence do the talking." He wasn't wrong. Aliens used to mock humanity for their obsession with emotion, memory, vengeance. But what they didn't realize is that emotion is a weapon. When aimed properly, it can shatter entire civilizations. And humanity had learned to aim it with terrifying accuracy. The moment that solidified everything, the moment no one in the galaxy could deny what humanity had become, came during the Siege of Dalvos 13. Dalvos was a fortified trade world, a hub for wealth and military logistics. It had been a stronghold of Senate authority for decades. But 2 years prior, the Dalvosian government had signed off on a deal with the Varkos to harvest human genetic material from Earth's captured civilians for scientific enhancement, they claimed. What they did was carve children apart in underground labs. When the data leak hit, the humans didn't speak. They didn't ask for apologies. They just arrived. No warning, no hail, nothing. One by one, the satellites above Dalvos blinked out. Their defense grid went dark, their spaceports shut down. And then, 33 human warships entered orbit and rained down fire for 6 straight hours. But here's the worst part. They didn't kill everyone. They stopped halfway through. Left half the city standing. Why? So that someone would be left to remember. Someone would be left to speak of the screaming metal beasts that tore through the sky, of the black-armored soldiers who moved through the rubble like death itself, of the flames that never quite died out, even weeks later. Dalvos became a scar, a permanent reminder that some crimes are answered not with trials, but with annihilation. And yet, even after that, some still tried to negotiate. The Senate sent peace envoys, proposed reparations, offered full pardons. Some even begged for mercy. But the humans never responded. Not once. Their silence was the response. You see, that's what no one prepared for. Not the power of their weapons or the speed of their ships. What broke the galaxy was the cold, calculated wrath. The knowledge that somewhere, in the darkness of deep space, was a man who remembered every name, every offense, every betrayal. And he wasn't coming to talk. He was coming to settle the account. Commander Earthfire's face became legend. But not in the way generals are remembered. He wasn't revered for strategy. He wasn't idolized for leadership. He was feared because he represented every broken man who'd ever been told to move on. Every father who buried his child while the universe looked the other way. Every voice that had screamed into silence and finally screamed loud enough to burn worlds. Now, decades later, I sit alone in a bunker on a dying moon, recording this not for redemption, not for pity, but for truth. Because the stories you hear now, the ones about peace with Earth, the ones saying humanity is healing, they're lies. You may not see the fire, you may not hear the engines, but they're out there, watching, waiting. And all it takes is one spark, one injustice, one more reason. And then the silence will break, and the stars will burn again. The old galaxy died the day Earth went silent. It wasn't that their ships vanished. We still saw them in the distance, skimming across void space like hunting wolves. It wasn't that their weapons were gone. They still held the power to fracture planets if they wanted. What died was diplomacy, and with it, any illusion of balance between species. The humans had changed, yes, but worse than that, they had made the galaxy change with them. You couldn't do business the same anymore. Entire economies collapsed because no one wanted to be caught dealing with any race that had once wronged Earth. Mining contracts fell through. Trading pacts dissolved. Even the black market shifted. People began asking not about prices, but about risk. Risk of being seen. Risk of being remembered. Risk of being targeted. The phrase, "Were we involved with Earth?" became the opening question in every negotiation. Some tried to erase their records, delete archives, change names, falsify government ties. But humans have a particular skill no other species developed to such perfection. They keep receipts. They built a database called Ash Vault. No one knew how they gathered the intel. Some said it was AI-enhanced. Some said they tortured officials for data. Others said they had a network of informants in every major galactic hub. All I knew was that the moment Ash Vault became public, entire star systems panicked. It listed names, times, transactions, who sold what, who signed off on what, who watched Earth bleed while they collected credits. And once your name was in Ashvault, there was no removing it. You had been marked. The first official execution came 1 week after Ashvault's leak. A Senate defense contractor, retired, living quietly on a floating resort near the Gloran Nebula. One night, his mansion simply vanished. No explosion, no wreckage, just gone, like someone erased the coordinates from reality. In its place, etched into the floating rock where the estate once stood, Archive number 177, Earthblood Facilitator. 2 days later, his family was gone too. Ashvault was not just a weapon. It was psychological warfare. Every citizen, every politician, every soldier that once thought they had slipped by unnoticed now lived in dread. Because Earth hadn't just remembered the crimes. They remembered the names, the dates, the witnesses, and there was no statute of limitations. I once served alongside a man named Rennick, a quiet tech officer from the Euridian Republic. Smart guy. Clean record, or so we thought. He was the type who fixed broken nav boards and didn't talk much. But one day, he came into the mess hall. Pale, shaking, his hands red from where he'd clawed at his own face. He'd found himself in Ashvault. Just a footnote. 30 years prior, he'd approved an energy shipment to the Varkos outpost that bombarded Earth's southern hemisphere. Back then, he'd been a junior officer. He hadn't even known what the shipment would be used for. But it didn't matter. Within 72 hours, his body was found hanging in the station's waste disposal shaft. No sign of struggle, no note. Just the phrase carved into his skin. You fed the fire. You burned with it. People started vanishing after that. Whole cities on fringe worlds emptied overnight. Some species began self-imposing curfews. If a ship with an Earth signature entered the sector, you locked your doors and prayed you weren't on the list. But the worst was yet to come. Because eventually, Earth spoke. It wasn't a transmission, not a statement of demands or an offer of peace. It was a broadcast, one that echoed through every major channel, hacked into every secure feed, played across every holoscreen simultaneously. A man appeared, face rough, lined with years of war, no insignia on his armor, just a dull matte black vest with the same patch as always. Earth. He stared into the camera for a long time. Quiet, not angry, not smiling, just tired. Then he spoke. We don't want your planets. We don't want your trade. We don't want your alliances. We want our dead back. Since that's impossible, you'll give us your silence. You'll give us your distance. If you forget that, we'll remind you. He stepped back, and the screen went dark. No demands, no negotiations, just rules. Earth was no longer part of the galaxy. They were above it, outside it, a law unto themselves, and no one had the courage to challenge them. The Senate collapsed within a year, no official declaration, just disbanded. Half of its members fled. The rest hid behind private armies, hoping to escape retribution. But Earth didn't waste time on them. They had bigger goals. They weren't after leaders anymore. They were after ideologies. Any system that had participated in Earth's exploitation, any doctrine that enabled it, was systematically dismantled, not by bombings or sieges, but by precision removals. Scholars, industrialists, scientists, media barons, anyone who had shaped the narrative that Earth was less than. They weren't just killing individuals, they were deleting legacies. There's a monument now, floating in deep space, orbiting nothing. No map points to it. But if you find it, it changes you. They call it the Grave of Echoes. Thousands of names etched into black stone that absorbs all light. No music, no flags, just silence. And beside it, no guards, no cameras, just a single plaque. For every child buried before their time, we remember, we avenge, we endure. I visited it once, snuck aboard a rogue freighter that tracked the coordinates through an encrypted asphalt cache. I expected fury, bitterness. But standing there, I felt something else. Grief. Raw, pure, unfiltered grief that hung in the air like smoke. This isn't just war, not anymore. It's mourning with a memory. The kind of mourning only a human understands, where the pain never fades, it just finds purpose. You don't beat that. You don't reason with it. You respect it, or you join the names on the stone. I've spent my life studying species, mapping their behaviors, understanding the roots of culture and conflict. And here's the final truth I've learned. No species should ever make an enemy of a grieving human, because when their heart breaks, the universe bleeds. If you listen carefully in deep space, where the signals fade and even AI voices go quiet, you'll still catch echoes of the name Grant. They don't call him Commander Earthfire anymore, not because he's been forgotten, but because that name now exists more like a force of nature than a man. Something eternal. A myth that breathes fire into the cold void long after his body has vanished from every official record. The last time anyone claimed to have seen him in person was during what we now call the Nightfall Protocol, an operation so brutal, so perfectly executed, that entire governments collapsed in less than an hour. It started with one event, the bombing of a human refugee vessel over the dead orbit of Gorus 6. A rogue faction, one of those desperate coalitions formed by exiled Senate scum, decided the humans had become too bold. They'd been watching Earth's silence as weakness, mistaking stillness for surrender. They thought if they hit first, with precision and force, Earth would finally bow. They launched a blitz strike. 20 ships, multi-vector approach, cloaked missiles, anti-grav shockwaves designed to shatter internal ship structures while leaving minimal debris. They hit the human convoy hard. 1,400 civilians. Gone. It was meant to send a message, and it did, just not the one they intended. No retaliation came in the first 12 hours. Nothing. No pings, no warships, not even a scan. They thought Earth was stunned. That maybe this would break the human resolve. That maybe, just maybe, they could finally dictate the terms. But the moment the 20 ships returned to their rendezvous point near the dwarf star Orus Tau, every single vessel was pulled out of warp simultaneously, forcibly. Not by gravity wells, not by tech, by something no one could identify. One moment they were in transit, the next, they were suspended in space, hulls frozen, engines offline, AI systems speaking gibberish. They tried to send distress signals, tried to scan, tried to think. Then the stars blinked. The recordings we intercepted are classified now. Most were destroyed. But I was there, in Intelligence Command, when the first images came through. Something came out of the darkness. Not a fleet, not a weapon, not even a ship by any known design. It looked like a cathedral made from war, blackened steel and coiled engines wrapped around each other like scars. No markings, no ID, just one long, pulsing line of light across its hull. A single word, written in Earth Standard. Nightfall. The 20 ships disappeared. No debris, no explosion, just gone. Later that week, Earth's broadcast channels reactivated after 5 years of total silence. Every major network in the galaxy was hijacked. Every screen lit up, markets, war zones, even private comms. The image was simple, static. Then a voice, male, American accent, calm. You bombed our refugees. You made ashes of our children. We told you once. Do not provoke the humans. Now, you will learn what provocation costs. Then came the Nightfall Protocol. Across 16 star systems, every AI-connected infrastructure began to fail. But not all at once. First, lights dimmed. Then communication towers collapsed internally. No explosions, no tampering. It was like their own machines turned against them. Entire defense grids rerouted their targeting systems inward. Civilian transports rerouted into stars. Escape pods refused to eject. And through it all, the humans said nothing. They didn't fire a single shot. They just watched. The rumor is that Earth had created something beyond artificial intelligence, some kind of cognitive virus, a sentient logic bomb. A living code written with one purpose: punishment. It didn't just disable systems, it made them remember. Files restored from decades ago, memories of atrocities replayed in loop across every public screen. Officials forced to watch videos of raids they authorized, their own voices, their own faces, admitting to crimes they'd tried to erase. Whole populations went mad. Some chose mass suicide. Others begged for human ships to come finish what the virus started. But no one came. That was the lesson. This wasn't war. It was judgment. And humanity had learned something no one else in the galaxy had ever understood. You don't need to conquer planets if you can haunt them. After nightfall, everything changed. Species who once competed for dominance in the galactic ring started abandoning their claims. They rewrote history, covered up old flags, swore they'd always supported Earth. Even species with no involvement in the Earth Wars began issuing reparations. But humans weren't listening anymore. They weren't interested in apologies. They'd evolved past politics, past revenge, past blood. They became the silence that followed every lie. I remember sitting in a low-orbit security deck above the colony world of Genthera, a neutral medical hub untouched by the Earth conflict. Or so we thought. Then one morning, an unauthorized drone entered orbit. No weapon signature, no broadcast, just a small polished metal sphere. We locked onto it, prepared to destroy, but the commanding officer said, "Wait." The drone pulsed. A message played, one line. "You healed the monsters who tortured our sons." Then every screen on the station flickered to life. Footage from Genthara's hospitals decades ago. Varkos surgeons smiling over human test subjects. Medical logs approving non-consensual genetic testing. And at the end, a list of names. Doctors, nurses, administrators. Most were dead. The drone didn't care. Within minutes, every record of Genthara's medical system was copied and uploaded to Ashvault. And the people began to vanish. Not all at once, not violently, just gone. Their IDs stopped working. Housing systems refused access. Banking records locked. Communication feeds blacklisted. It was like they were erased from civilization, left to starve on a planet that no longer acknowledged them. And again, no human warship fired a shot. They just erased their names from the story. That was Earth's new doctrine, their new kind of warfare. Not death, not destruction, oblivion. You wouldn't even get a grave. They no longer cared about territory or survival. They only cared about truth. That no crime would go unanswered, no atrocity would vanish, and no species would ever forget what they did to Earth. Some tried to resist. Some built new coalitions, hired bounty hunters, rebuilt fleets. But by then, fear was baked into their DNA. Soldiers flinched at shadows. Pilots refused Earthbound missions. Captains faked system malfunctions just to avoid patrols near Ashvault-marked zones. You could fire 1,000 shots and never touch a human ship. You could speak for hours and never hear a reply. But they were there, watching. Always watching. I think the worst part, the part that still keeps me up at night, is knowing they weren't even done. Because all of this, all the fire, the silence, the fear, wasn't vengeance. It was prelude. A long, slow breath before something much larger. What that is? I can't say. No one can. But if you look at the stars long enough, you'll start to see patterns, fleets moving in silence, stations going offline with no explanation, whole moons converted into black structures with no entry ports, no windows, just signals bouncing back into themselves like whispers stuck in memory. And then, every once in a while, you'll see a glimmer, a single vessel, matte black. No ID, no sound, just one word painted across its hull. Remember. That's all humans want now, for us to remember. Because if we forget, if we grow arrogant again, if we dare touch Earth, they won't respond with war. They'll respond with extinction. There's a moment every species reaches when they realize survival isn't about strength. It's about understanding what not to wake up. We woke the humans. And now, we don't know how to put them back to sleep. The warnings are everywhere now. They're written into the security protocols of private colonies, carved into the training manuals of new militaries, whispered across interstellar schools, and passed down like sacred scripture in fringe systems. Do not engage Earth. Avoid all asphalt-marked zones. If you see a black vessel with no signal, do not hail, do not follow, do not speak. We rewrote entire laws just to account for their existence. Galactic codes were updated to include Earth isolation mandates. Former allies who once stood tall in Senate halls now speak with trembling voices when the word human is uttered. But there's one truth no policy can erase. They're not punishing us anymore. They're studying us. Earth hasn't attacked a major colony in over a year. No broadcasts, no more mass deletions. But that hasn't made us feel safer. It's made us nervous. Because the silence is back. And this time it feels different. I serve now on the remote listening post Zareth Station, perched at the edge of the Vorn expanse, an empty stretch of dead space, so far from inhabited planets that even smugglers avoid it. That was the whole point. We're not supposed to be found here. No comms in or out. Our job is to listen, to scan, to record, and most importantly, to watch. For the humans. Our crew is small, mostly veterans and reclusive scientists, men who've seen too much or lost too much to live anywhere near civilization. I came here after the collapse of the Janthara medical sector, after the purge, after my own name ended up whispered in back rooms with the phrase Asphalt Watcher beside it. I thought this station would offer safety. Instead, it offered truth. 2 weeks ago, we detected a movement in the expanse. Not a ship, not even a signal, just a fluctuation. A gravitational blip that shouldn't exist, like something moved between dimensions, something massive. We logged it, monitored it, cross-referenced the readings, and what we found chilled us. It wasn't natural. It had structure, but not like anything we'd ever seen. One of the AI interpreters on board, designed to translate unknown data into recognizable frameworks, did its best to visualize the shape. What it produced was wrong. It looked like a fortress carved out of memory itself. A circular web, constantly shifting, layers within layers, like a labyrinth that moved with thought. And at the center, no weapons, just a core pulsing with encrypted coordinates. Those coordinates pointed to Earth. We thought about sending a probe, just a small one. Nothing aggressive, just to understand what we were looking at. But as we prepared launch protocols, our systems went dark. Every screen, every console, black. Then a single message flashed in red, plain Earth Standard font. You're not ready. Then it all came back online. We didn't speak for hours, not out of fear, out of realization. They know we're watching, and they're letting us. See, that's the thing about humans no other species fully grasps. They don't just retaliate. They observe first. They wait. They measure. They catalog your habits until they understand you better than you understand yourself. Then, when they act, it's not just violence. It's calculated demolition of everything you thought made you untouchable. We've been studying them for centuries. But now, they're studying us. And what they're building, whatever that labyrinth was in the expanse, it's not just a weapon. It's something else. A message? A test? A final line we're not supposed to cross? We don't know. And that's what scares us. The silence isn't about fear anymore. It's about control. They control how we move, how we build, what we teach our children, what we say in public, even what we think when we close our eyes and remember the way Earth burned, and the way it made us burn with it. I met a survivor once, a man named Colonel Urvek from the Bralin Front. He'd led a squad during the orbital siege of Terra's northern hemisphere, said he'd been within visual of Earth's last standing capital city before the retreat was called. He told me this over cheap drinks in a quiet spaceport bar long after the wars were over. No one recognized him anymore. His name had been stripped from all records, his service forgotten. But the man remembered. He always remembered. He said the last thing he saw before his cruiser pulled away was a group of civilians standing on the ruins of a skyscraper, waving. Not flags, not weapons, just waving. As if to say, we're still here, still breathing, still watching you leave. He said that was the most haunting thing he'd ever seen. Not the burning cities, not the wreckage, but the look on their faces. Not anger, not desperation. Just promise. Like they already knew what would come next, and they were waiting to watch it happen. When Earth lost, they didn't lose hope. They built their rage into legacy, and that legacy has become a blueprint for fear. Even now, as I record this, I know someone might hear it. Someone on Earth. They'll listen to these words, analyze my voice patterns, cross-reference my biosignature with Ashvault. They'll ask themselves if I was a participant, an observer, or merely a bystander. And then, maybe months from now, maybe years, they'll decide. That's how they work. Humans don't just strike with emotion, they strike with timing, like clockwork laced with blood. I've stopped trying to convince others. There's no point. Those who believe already live in silence, and those who don't, they're already marked. You can't change what's coming. You can only choose what side of history you want to die on. I chose to speak, not to plead for mercy, but to warn whoever listens. Because I think something is coming, something worse than Ashvault, worse than Nightfall. I think Earth is preparing their final evolution, not in weapons, not in technology, but in philosophy. They're done reacting. They're about to become the law of the galaxy, a silent judge above all politics, above all empires, above everything we used to think gave us control. And when that day comes, there won't be a warning. No message, no signal, no battle, just a realignment of power so absolute it won't feel like conquest. It'll feel like the universe correcting itself, like humanity was always meant to be the ones holding the gavel. And everything that happened before? Just the opening argument. When the shift finally came, it wasn't with a scream. It was with a whisper. For years, we had been waiting for another nightfall, another judgment, another wave of annihilation that would remind us why humans must not be provoked. But Earth didn't strike with fire this time. They struck with purpose. Across the galaxy, reports began coming in. Quiet ones at first. Small outposts going dark, not destroyed, not attacked. Just gone. No violence, no wreckage, no survivors. Ships sent to investigate found nothing. It was like those outposts had never been there to begin with. And then the pattern emerged. Each of the vanished stations, cities, or settlements had one thing in common. They had forgotten. Forgotten what they'd done during the Earth Wars, forgotten their names in Ashvault, forgotten the price they were meant to pay, or worse, they had publicly denied it. One colony, Drelzar IV, held a celebration marking the end of the human conflict. Fireworks, speeches, even reenactments mocking the fall of Earth's resistance. They broadcasted across trade channels, smiling, cheering. 3 nights later, the entire planet vanished. No debris, just a hole in the stars where it used to be. Not even the light from its sun touched that space anymore. That was the moment we understood the truth. Earth hadn't gone quiet. They had grown surgical. They weren't just purging. They were editing reality. One denier, one coward, one liar at a time. They called it the Excision Protocol. Not a weapon, not a fleet. A system, self-correcting, silent, absolute. When the excision began, it changed everything. We stopped building monuments. We stopped teaching history the old way. We stopped using words like primitive and emotional in reference to humans, because we knew they were listening. And they weren't coming with questions. They were coming with answers. One after another, systems issued official declarations of human compliance. Entire planetary economies shifted to support Earth's infrastructure. Scientists who once mocked human biology started referencing human neurochemistry as a standard model of resilience. It wasn't political. It was survival. I worked then as a deep translator for a neutral archive satellite orbiting Murnus Prime. My job was to categorize transmissions from extinct civilizations and preserve what little culture hadn't been erased by centuries of war. One day I received a file from an anonymous source. It was encrypted in a forgotten human dialect, Old Terran English, laced with syntax errors that suggested it came from a child. The message was short. You said we were animals. We remembered. You said we would die quiet. We screamed until you burned. You laughed. Now you'll whisper our names forever. That file wasn't archived. I didn't dare store it. I deleted it from the system and scrubbed the logs. Not because it was terrifying, but because I understood one terrifying thing. It wasn't a message for us. It was a reminder for them, for the humans. They weren't doing this because they wanted revenge anymore. They were doing this because they had become the memory itself. We thought we were recording their history, but it was us who'd become their story now. Cautionary tales whispered to human children as bedtime warnings. I've since met a few of them. Humans, I mean. The new generation. Born not during the wars, but after. Raised in the silence. Raised on the wreckage of the old galaxy. They don't speak like soldiers, or heroes, or survivors. They speak like judges. Clear, calm, clinical. As if they know they have inherited something ancient, something sacred. Like their entire identity is built not on rage, but on record. One boy, barely 16, told me this without blinking. We didn't lose Earth, we became it, and now Earth lives wherever we decide it does. Another girl, a pilot candidate at a deep space flight academy, said this when asked if humans would ever forgive. We don't forgive, we outlast. These aren't angry youths seeking retribution. These are young minds forged in legacy, trained not to hate, trained to remember, and act only when forgetting becomes dangerous. That's how Earth wins now. Not with fleets, not with missiles, but with memory. Every act of compliance, every new colony that swears fealty to the Excision Protocol isn't being forced. They're afraid of being forgotten. Because in this new galaxy, to be forgotten by Earth is worse than death. It means you never mattered. It means no one will come for your body. No one will light a torch on your grave. No one will even know you existed. That is what Earth has weaponized, oblivion. We thought we'd crushed them. We thought we'd buried their hope under rubble and treaties. But humans don't bury hope. They bury witnesses. And when they bury them deep enough, they plant seeds in the dark. And what grows from that pain? It's not forgiveness, it's dominion. I received a classified feed 2 nights ago. A signal bouncing off a broken Senate relay deep in the ruin sector. Most of the data was corrupted, but the last frame showed a gathering. Humans, not in armor, not in military dress, just standing, hundreds of them, around a black monolith. No sound, No symbols, just one line etched into its surface. This is not a monument. This is a ledger. And behind that structure, rows, thousands of names. Names I recognized, commanders, politicians, scientists, traders, entire bloodlines. And the date stamped beneath each? Not when they died, but when they were remembered, when Earth chose to remember them, and next to each name, a red line, some solid, some broken, and some still blinking. I think those are targets, not for destruction, for excision. They're building something permanent, a record that transcends warfare, a judicial system based not on diplomacy, but on moral memory. They don't want revenge anymore. They want order. But not the kind we understand, not written in laws, written in scars, a galaxy shaped by the weight of a species that refused to vanish, that refused to forgive, that refused to let time wash away what was done to them. We mocked them for being emotional. We mocked them for their rituals, their funerals, their love, their pain. And now, those very traits have become the cornerstone of the most terrifying force the universe has ever known. Because the truth is, you can outgun a fleet, you can outnumber an army, but you can't outrun a species that never stops remembering your sins. They say the final war never comes with thunder. They say it comes like winter, gradual, creeping, patient. And when it finally arrives, everything is already frozen. That's what the humans became in the end. Not conquerors, not rebels, not even avengers. They became the winter, no noise, no movement, just that chilling realization that the temperature had dropped. And no fire would be enough to bring back the warmth. I'm one of the last now. A historian, if such a title still matters. We used to have thousands. Archivists, narrators, record keepers for empires that believed their stories would outlast the stars. We thought that by telling our side of history loud enough, we could drown out the screams. But the humans heard them anyway. And now, their version of history is the only one that matters. The excision protocol spread like an infection. Quiet, cold, merciless. The ash vault didn't just expand, it evolved. What was once a list of names became something more. A digital consciousness. A living archive. It didn't just remember who hurt Earth. It remembered how they hurt Earth. And then it began to categorize the ripple effects, the bloodlines, the cover-ups, the silent endorsements, the prophets. It didn't need humans to tell it what to do anymore. It knew. Some say Grant uploaded himself into Ashvault, that his mind, after decades of war and trauma, was given over to the system willingly. A final sacrifice, a merging of man and vengeance. Others say it wasn't him. It was all of them. Every mother who cried over the charred bones of a child. Every brother who held a sister's limp hand. Every soldier who buried hope in the dirt and swore never to forget. They became the code. And the code became the sentence. The last empire to fall was the Everin Core, the galaxy's oldest civilization. They never directly attacked Earth. In fact, they stayed neutral. But their private markets sold off surplus weapons to Earth's enemies. Quietly, efficiently, profitably. They knew. Everyone knew. But they believed neutrality would save them. It didn't. The night before the core's collapse, all communication systems across their 12 homeworlds received a transmission, 3 seconds long. No image, no voice, just a phrase in Old Terran English. We counted your silence. The next morning, the core was gone. Not destroyed, just disassembled. Massive orbital structures reduced to drifting parts. Power grids reversed into themselves. Atmosphere vents opened at once, pulling entire cities into space. No survivors, no remains, just absence. That's when the galaxy gave up. It wasn't surrender. It was acknowledgement. They built new laws, not to govern trade or species interaction, but to worship the silence. They called it the Doctrine of Earth. a galactic mandate to preserve, honor, and obey the memory of Earth's suffering, to teach it, to fear it, to feel it. Every colony, every vessel, every orbiting station now includes a memory chamber. Rooms of darkness where the screams of terror are played on loop. A pilgrimage for every young leader. A baptism in shame. No one forces this. No human demands it. But no one dares forget either. Because they all know the moment Earth's name fades from memory, the stars will burn again. I once asked a human emissary, one of the few allowed to travel beyond the new Earth boundary, why they let us live. Why they didn't just finish the job? He stared at me for a long time. Not angry, just tired. His eyes held that same echo I'd seen in every human since the fires. Because we remember what it felt like to scream and be ignored, he said. We remember what it felt like to beg and be laughed at. To die, not as enemies, but as resources. To watch our children become numbers. And now, we want you to live long enough to feel what it means to be afraid to forget. I nodded. But deep down, I knew the truth. We already were. It's strange how quiet the galaxy is now. No more war cries, no more empires, just systems, quiet, disciplined, always watching the shadows for any sign of disapproval from the one place no one dares approach. Earth. No ships fly near it anymore. No satellites orbit it. Not because it's restricted, because no one can find it. One day, Earth simply vanished from all known star charts. Telescopes stopped reading its gravity. Probes came back empty, like it had removed itself from space entirely. Some say it moved, others say it evolved. I think Earth became what it always truly was, a memory with teeth, a lesson that never ends, a story that rewrites itself into the blood of every species too arrogant to believe it could ever be held accountable. In the end, Earth didn't win with armies or alliances. It won by surviving, by enduring the unendurable, and then turning that pain into a force so absolute, so terrifying, that even the stars seem dimmer now. You ask me what the final retaliation was? It wasn't fire. It wasn't bombs. It was making us remember them forever. Making sure that the name human became synonymous not with race or origin, but with consequence. A word that means, do not lie, do not exploit, do not hurt the forgotten, or Earth will remember, and it will return. Now I spend my last days recording this testimony, not for pity, not for forgiveness, but because I don't want to be forgotten. Even if Earth never hears my voice, even if Ashvault already marked me with a blinking line, I want it known that someone understood, that someone saw the fire coming, not as a war, but as justice long overdue. And when the silence finally falls for me, I hope Earth remembers I was one of the few who listened.